Hello everybody and welcome to this review of the Transformers Kingdom leader class Galvatron, a character which I know pretty much everybody has been really looking forward to actually seeing make his War for Cybertron debut, and for good reason too. Galvatron is of course one of the most popular G1 characters, and despite his previous incarnation, that being the Voyager class Titan's Return figure, having a pretty decent looking robot mode, the head gimmick for many people, myself included, completely ruined that figure, and the War for Cybertron line has pretty much been giving us basically mini masterpiece representations of some of our favourite G1 and now of course Beast Wars characters. And Galvatron is also one of the biggest names to actually grace the Kingdom chapter, so I'm really hoping that he does have quite a substantial role in the upcoming third chapter. Let's bring Galvatron in and take a closer look at the detail. So here we have Galvatron looking as if though he's just been reformatted from Megatron into his brand new body by the Chaos Bringer himself, Unicron, and Hasbro and Takara Tomy have done a smashing job. Now, as many of you know, Galvatron is being bracketed under the leader class price point, although he's more along the lines of what we saw with Earthrise Optimus Prime and Siege Astro Train where scale is concerned, but much like those characters, he more than makes up for it as far as parts count, complexity to the conversion, density to the plastic, and accessories are concerned. Honestly, this guy is really hefty, which was something that surprised me upon getting him in hand. As we take a look here at the details, the head sculpt looks really well done. Of course, the head crest has been slightly smoothened out as this is a Hasbro product, but it definitely does resemble the character from the 86 movie and of course season 3 of the G1 series. If I did have any critiques, however, it's that I do find the facial expression to be a little too generic for Galvatron. I would have loved to have gotten perhaps a snarling expression or maybe just a sinister smile, something to just give the character a little bit of personality, but the sculpt work that we do get has turned out really well, especially the definition there to the cheekbones, and they've even gone to the extra extent, it would seem, to apply a black wash to the mouth line as well as to the eyes in order to just make the sculpt pop a little more. As we take a look here towards the back of the helmet, this too has been sculpted really nicely, and we of course do have the G1 Galvatron back spike. As we turn our attention here to the torso region, something which I was very surprised to see, and I know many collectors too were, is that they have decided to bring the Siege battle damage back for Galvatron. This was something that was very rarely seen in Earthrise and appeared to be pretty much abolished for Kingdom, so I have no idea as to why Galvatron has been painted this way. My only thought process is that perhaps they are making a cleaner version of Galvatron, perhaps in the Gen Select line, so if you really do want a pristine, very G1 accurate looking version, I definitely would recommend to see as to what that Gen Select version does entail. But the actual sculpt work has turned out really well. You can see we've got some nice panel lining detailing here for the chest, the Decepticon insignia, and the wash, whilst isn't my preferred look for the character, I don't think looks too bad at all. It has been used rather subtle and definitely does give you that impression that this version of Galvatron is war-torn. We also do have some very nice looking details here for the torso with a mix of metallic and silver reds, and this is also something that we can see on the HasLab Unicron, so that definitely is some great continuity as far as the design is concerned, which we have to credit Fluoro Deary for. As we take a look here at his arms, I have heard some collectors complain in regards to the proportions. All I can say is that having Galvatron in hand, the proportions of the shoulders do not look nowhere near as bad as some of those first in-hand images did make them to be. You can, however, if you were so inclined, actually reverse the shoulders in order to add a few centimeters of height. You can just see in comparison that this does sit a little higher when in comparison to this, although I personally am not a huge fan of the silver pin facing forwards, so once again I guess it will just be down to personal preference. But if we do have them reversed in the correct configuration, you can see how we do reveal some nice looking sculpt work. As we take a look here at the forearms, you can once again see some of that Siege battle damage, but the fingers have turned out really well as far as the sculpt is concerned. Seeing as we are paying leader price point, I would have loved to have gotten articulated fingers here for Galvatron, much like we saw with Earthrise Optimus, and especially considering this guy comes with the Matrix, and one of the most iconic scenes in the 1986 movie is when Galvatron does in fact try to actually use the Matrix on Unicron and fails miserably to do so, but nevertheless that is a minor critique. One thing that I do have a criticism with though is the proportions here to the treads. Now I am fully aware that Galvatron did have these in the 86 movie and of course subsequent seasons of G1, but I do think that these are a little overkill. They definitely do appear too big in comparison to the rest of the sculpt, and maybe if they could have just added a hinge joint here so that we could have flipped this section up and just compressed it to the shoulder, I probably would not have had nowhere near as much of an issue as I do. When you actually do bend the elbow, they do appear to just hang off the sides, and it can create for a very unsightly look. I have actually found myself spending quite a significant amount of time trying to make these look good when displaying Galvatron in some of those more dynamic poses, so that is something that I would have liked to have seen fixed. But nevertheless, as we turn our attention here down to the lower section, you can see some fantastic looking sculpt work for the skirt region, region, as well as here for the thighs. Minimal hollow pieces on this character. The only real hollow space that we have here is on the side of the arm, and this is in order to accommodate transformation, so I am able to give that an easy pass. We also do get some nice purple paint here for the kneecaps, as well as some nice red detailing. This entire black region is in fact paint application, and of course we've got the grey plastic, which has been sculpted really well with that siege wash applied over the top. The feet do appear to be a little stubbier in comparison to what we saw in G1, although much like the head design, I put this down to the fact that maybe they wanted to smoothen out some of those sharper edges just so these areas were not too spiky for, of course, younger collectors. As we spin around here to the back, you can see that Galvatron does in fact clean up rather well, and the majority of his back is completely concealed once again with minimal hollow gaps, which is super awesome. They've even gone to the extra extent, it would appear, to sculpt in perhaps some thrusters, as of course we do see Galvatron fly around in the 86 movie, although he does primarily appear to use his particle beam cannon in order to do so. It is cool that they did add all these almost thruster details to the heel spurs. As far as articulation is concerned, Galvatron's head is on a ball joint, so this can look left to right as well as up and down. I maybe would have liked to have gotten a little more range of motion looking up, but nevertheless, we of course do get a full rotation here at the shoulder. We also do get hinge joints, which can go to a terrific degree. We get a full rotation here at the bicep due to transformation, a double joint here at the elbow, full range of motion here at the wrists. If you move the hip skirt out of the way, we also do get a decent waist rotation. This section here, for whatever reason, can hinge upwards. These sections here can hinge out to the sides in order to accommodate the splits. We can, of course, kick forwards that far, back to that far. We get a full rotation here at the thigh, a 90-degree bend there at the knee, and then finally here for the foot, we do get an ankle pivot, although I would have maybe liked to have seen this bend a little further. But if you do decide to mistransform him, you can definitely exaggerate that range of motion, but then you will break up the sculpt, which doesn't look the best. As far as accessories are concerned, of course we do get Galvatron's particle beam cannon. Now this has turned out so nicely. You can see there we've got a mix of silver and the cast black plastic, which looks awesome. There are a few ways that you can actually peg this onto the figure, so we get an upper bicep port as well as a lower forearm port. I would recommend using this port if you wish to have the particle cannon actually moving along with the arm when posing, but as far as actually having it housed on the figure in a neutral pose, I think the bicep port works exceptionally well. We also do get a fantastic orange fade here for paint over the top of the transparent orange plastic, and the skull work on this piece too has turned out exceptionally well. Honestly, this is a very impressive looking piece, and if you were so inclined to, you can bring in some of those siege blast effects, port them there into the cannon, and make it appear as if though Galvatron is flying through the depths of space, or maybe firing at Rodimus Prime and the Autobots. We also do get a few additional accessories, most noticeably would be the Matrix of Leadership, and you can see that it is being housed here on this solid piece of plastic, which is supposed to resemble the chain. Now the sculpt work for this has turned out okay. Of course, considering this is a solid piece, it's not going to look nowhere near as good as perhaps some of those third-party companies, but it does the job, and you can see the Matrix is the exact same sculpt as we've seen previously, albeit this time with a slightly brighter blue paint application used here for the main gem. This can be put over the top here of Galvatron's neck, and I think he looks awesome with this. And we also do get a pair of gunships. Now these do in fact resemble Galvatron's Revenge, the ship which is gifted to him by Unicron, and it's a really nice touch for those of us who have in fact picked up the HasLab Unicron. But for those of you who don't have that figure, you can actually combine these to form a larger, almost plasma rifle here for Galvatron, and I think that's a really awesome touch. Just taking a closer look here at the sculpt work, you can see the entire surface has got so much panel lining detail. We've even got the thrusters here on the side, all of which very much resemble the Revenge ship. I maybe would have liked to have seen these here cast in a purple plastic, but nevertheless they do look awesome, and as mentioned, you can combine them and port them here into Galvatron's arm. For a comparison, here we have the included transparent display base that we got with HasLab Unicron. Now unfortunately there is no stand attachment, so you can't actually peg any of the Revenge alongside the Autobot shuttle, but just to give you a comparison between the miniature Galvatron slug figure and of course here with the Autobot shuttle, I do think it scales quite well here with the shuttle, but definitely not so much there with the minifigures. Turning to a size comparison, we have here the almost evolution of Megatron into Galvatron, and Galvatron into Super Megatron, but you can see that Kingdom Galvatron does in fact tower over Siege Voyager Megatron. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but I never believed Galvatron was this substantially taller than Megatron. Of course, in G1, I don't believe we ever actually see these two characters on screen with one another, but at least in the most recent Earthrise Netflix series, I believed Galvatron was more along the lines of Megatron's height. So are Hasbro and Takara Tomy just increasing the height a little bit in order to warrant the leader class price point, or is he this tall in order to scale with Commander class Rodimus Prime? I guess only time will tell, but I do think the scale here is slightly off. Not by a considerable amount, but it is definitely noticeable, at least to me. Turning to a War for Cybertron leader comparison, we have Galvatron compared next to Double Dealer and of course Ultra Magnus, and I was quite surprised to see that not only is Galvatron taller than Double Dealer, but he is also quite a bit heavier than that character. And for another comparison, we have Galvatron compared next to both Studio Series Hot Rod and Grimlock, as well as Earthrise leader Optimus Prime. And you can see that whilst he is taller than Hot Rod and Prime, he still isn't what I personally regard as true leader scale, that being Grimlock. Grimlock is by far one of the biggest leaders that we've gotten, I believe, in the past 3 years. So it will be really interesting to see how the upcoming Commander class Rodimus does scale with Galvatron. But definitely, I think these characters here work really, really well with one another. And for probably the most important comparison, we have Galvatron compared next to Cyclonus the Warrior and Scourge the Tracker, and I actually think the scale between these three works really well, although something which I don't think works all that well is the colorization. I do still think that Galvatron is perhaps a little too dark as far as his purple is concerned, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that upcoming Gen Select figure does in fact turn out. For a more in-depth side-by-side comparison, you can see Voyager Cyclonus there is actually smaller than Galvatron, which I wasn't expecting considering Cyclonus is quite a large Voyager class. Of course, you can extend the knees. And here for another comparison, we have Scourge and Galvatron, and Scourge does in fact actually look quite a bit smaller in comparison, but I still do think it looks awesome, and this was the comparison that I was most eager to actually get done upon getting Galvatron. I ran to my room and I just posed these three out all day long alongside Unicron. It's so awesome. So with everything I believe just about wrapped up here for robot mode, let's get Galvatron fully transformed up into that Cybertronian space cannon. So of course we shall remove the particle beam cannon here. I would turn my attention here to the wrists and just collapse them in, and something which is a really nice attention to detail is that when doing so, a tab will in fact completely fill out here this hollow space. You're going to want to repeat the same process here on this side. These slots shall in fact house these tabs, so just fold here on that double elbow joint and repeat the same process, snap that into place. We'll then want to bring the treads forwards. Now, something which I may have failed to mention is that in robot mode, you are in fact supposed to actually take this tab, which is redundant when in cannon mode, and port it here into this slot. I imagine that's just so that you create a little more of a cleaner and neutral look when getting him into robot mode, although that will compromise the bicep rotation, so it's something that I personally don't choose to do. So we'll shift this forwards here on this double hinge, and you can even see that they've actually sculpted in the hinge joints. These are going to come over the top and will in fact actually snap into place, completely solidifying their position for tank mode. So just angle that there out to the side, and of course repeat the same process, snap that there into place so that it is locked in. We can then turn our attention here to the bottom, fold in the heel spurs, which quite honestly you don't really even need for robot mode, it's just an added component. We can take these sections here, bring them to the front, and you can see this slot will house this tab, so snap that into place and repeat the same process. I would then recommend bringing these sections out. We can take here at the shoulder, detach this region, and then detach this region and just extend all of that out. Of course, repeat the same process, just extend that. You'll then want to detach this entire back region, shift this up, and then that will then allow you to take this entire section, pull this forwards, take this silver section, pull that down, take the chest plate, pull this down, which will allow you to tuck Galvatron's head into the cavity, and then you'll want to take the chest plate, collapse that, and then just take this here and snap this here over the top, just like so. We can then bring this entire region down. Now this is in fact on a soft ratchet joint, so you'll want to ensure that this here does actually snap there into place. Once completed, we can bring the legs here to the back, which will allow you to bring this entire section up, and you can see how we once again have got some fantastic looking sculpt work in there. Really nice attention to detail on this figure. Just compress that here to the back, turn your attention here, take the spike, fold this down, and this will peg into that slot, snap that into place, collapse that into place. We can then rotate here at the thigh, which will expose these two tabs. I would then recommend taking the foot, pulling this section down, folding out this almost tripod section for the tank mode, and repeat the same process, snap that there into place. We can then just clip all of these tabs in, And then we've got some tabs here on the bottom, so snap them in. And then, of course, this tab here snaps all of this in. Clip these two halves together, just like so. Ensure that this here is down. Now, this is something that I would definitely recommend paying attention to. So you can see that we do have these tabs which are intended to peg into these slots. There is, in fact, a pressure point. So if you do take your thumb and align this up appropriately, you can, of course, tab this in if you wanted to. Now, I would then just hold this section, push here on this, and it should just clip that there really nice and securely. Of course, come here to this side and repeat the same process. So this tab is going to house this slot. Snap that into place. We can then snap that into place. Once again, put your thumb here on this shoulder region and then just snap that there really nice and securely. Extend the treads out so that we have everything aligned up appropriately. We can then bring in the particle cannon, detach this section, and snap that there into place. And before we actually get done with the cannon mode, I want to show you firstly how you can in fact store some of the accessories. So we can take the Matrix of Leadership and actually port this here into this tab, which is a really nice design in my opinion. You can see that looks awesome. We can then actually take this section. Now, I personally don't like to actually leave this on here as there is minimal clearance between this circular region and this back spike. As I begin to push it down, I can definitely feel some force, and you can see how it is rubbing against this, and I do not want to scratch any of the silver paint. So if you do decide to leave this on, I would recommend just attaching that in order to allow this to slide down a lot easier, or just completely remove it and set it off to the side. We can also take here the Revenge ships, and these have got some nice slots that we'll peg here into these tabs, and just repeat the same process here on the opposite side. So there is Galvatron with some of those additional accessories. But other than that, that is the figure completely transformed here into his awesome looking cannon mode. Very nicely done, Hasbro. This looks really, really awesome. If you thought the robot mode was cool, wait till you get him here into the cannon mode. It is equally as good in my opinion. Honestly, this War for Cybertron trilogy has just been absolutely killing it as far as updating some of our favorite G1 characters, and I'm really intrigued to see as to where they'll go in the next trilogy. You can see that as far as the sculpt work is concerned here, it looks awesome. If I just remove this section so that we can actually appreciate some of the sharper details here, which you may in fact miss, you can see they have completely sculpted the interior of this, which is just so awesome. Even the actual barrel section that you plug the particle beam cannon into has been sculpted, and it looks superb. I just absolutely love how this has turned out. Of course, we've got these sections here. Everything is super solid. We've even got this almost tripod with the front two treads, and of course this section which is articulated, so you can bring this back in order to lower or raise the cannon, much like when he transforms and gives Starscream a hint and blasts him into oblivion, which is super awesome. We do in fact get some wheels here on the bottom, so if you do align all of this up appropriately, Galvatron should be able to roll along the ground, although this can take some time to actually ensure that everything is aligned up appropriately to do so, as unfortunately we only do get one wheel per tread than as opposed to two. But nevertheless, it definitely does look really cool. You can even see here this has been completely sculpted, which looks awesome. All of this comes together super nicely, and I just think that it's a really nice looking cannon mode. Quite surprised to see how well done this actually turned out. And as you saw, you can peg the Matrix onto the front, or the Revenge ships, and even that section there at the top. But definitely lovely looking details here. We've got some hydraulics, we've got some silver there for the treads, and the treads have actually been sculpted beautifully well as well. Super awesome looking figure. Well done, Hasbro. Once again, they've knocked it out the park here with Kingdom Galvatron. And before we go ahead and wrap this review up, here we have Galvatron compared next to both Scourge and of course Cyclonus. And you can see that here, even in his space cannon mode, he is quite a big figure, of course being almost as long as Cyclonus as far as length is concerned. Of course, where height is concerned, he definitely does win, and Scourge is more along the lines of a standard Voyager, so he's always going to be a little smaller. But I think the scale here works quite well. Of course, in the actual 86 movie, there was major mass shifting going on. Galvatron could in fact actually pilot Cyclonus's jet mode, so the scale is always going to be a little wonky. But just as far as an actual leader and Voyager scale is concerned, I think these three here look really awesome alongside one another. So to conclude my review here for Transformers Kingdom, leader class Galvatron, potentially the final leader class in the War for Cybertron trilogy, Hasbro and Takara Tomy have once again killed it. Much like all of the figures in this trilogy, this is such such an awesome update on one of our favourite G1 characters. Honestly, considering this guy is packaged at the leader class price point, Hasbro have been allowed to do perhaps a little more than they could have done at the Voyager. He feels so dense, the plastic quality is awesome, he's full of articulation. I maybe would have liked to have seen some articulated fingers, but that is just a minor critique for what is otherwise an excellent release. I really have no idea as to why we've got that siege battle damage, although I can presume that we are going to be getting a much more G1 faithful colour scheme in the form of potentially a Generation Select release. I think he comes with a really nice slew of accessories such as the Matrix of Leadership on the chain, the Particle Beam Cannon, as well as 2 of those Galvatron Revenge ships, of which you can either display alongside Unicron or actually give to Galvatron as gunships. I think the Transformation 2 is very, very genius. It's not too simplistic nor too complex, and it results in a really awesome space Cybertronian cannon mode. Honestly, it looks superb. We've got some great paint application, awesome looking details, and a great solid looking leader class. I really hope that you enjoyed my review. If you did, please do let me know down in the comment section below. I would love to know on what you guys think of this particular figure and whether or not you shall indeed be adding him to your collection. I do know that he is one of the most anticipated characters to come out of this third and final chapter of the War for Cybertron line, so it's great to see that they certainly have delivered with him, and I cannot wait once again to see as to what the next trilogy has in store for us. I thank you all for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.